you a story. I'm gonna read you. Hello, 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 hello. I'm gonna read you a story, guys. I'm gonna read you a story to help you go to sleep. I'm gonna read you a story, guys, to help you go to sleep. Before I do that, I'm gonna take some of the negative energy away. Follow my hands. Let's take away the negative energy that we don't need. I'm taking that energy and I'm gonna have to throw it as far away as I can because we don't need that. Let's slow it down. Let's slow it down and make sure we get all of that bad energy out of you. That way when you go to sleep, you can have positive dreams. You can have a positive day tomorrow. Alright, now that we got rid of that negative energy, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and read you a story. I'm gonna read you a story that I found. I'm reading it off of my tablet, guys. I hope you don't mind. The story is called The House That Learned My Name. I moved into the house because it was quiet. Not the quiet that rings in your ears or presses against your chest like a held breath, but the kind that feels settled, old, as though the silence had been there long before I arrived and would remain long after I left. The house sat at the end of the narrow road that curved just enough to hide it from passing cars. There were no neighboring homes close enough to see from the window. Only trees, tall, patient ones, their branches resting against one another like people who had known each other for decades and no longer needed conversation. The realtor talked too much during the walkthrough. She kept apologizing. The floor, the fixtures, the way one of the doors swelled slightly in the humid weather. But I barely listened. I was focused on the way the air felt. Still, cool, heavy in a comforting way. Like a blanket that folded and unfolded 1,000 times. This place has good boats, she said, laughing lightly. I remember thinking, it has memory. I didn't say that out loud. I signed the papers 2 days later. The first night I slept in the house, I dreamed of water. Not oceans or storms, just slow water. A stream moving over smooth stones, making the sound that never repeats itself exactly the same way twice. When I woke up, the dream clung to me as if it had soaked into my clothes. The house made noises, but not the alarming kind. Soft ones, the kind you only notice when you are afraid of them. A distant tick from somewhere in the walls. A sighing sound as the wood adjusted to the temperature. It felt like the house was breathing around me, not at me. I whispered good morning without thinking. The words disappeared into the room. Nothing answered. Still, I smiled. I fell into a routine quickly. Morning began with the tea in the kitchen, sunlight stretching itself across the floorboards in long, golden lines. The kettle. The kettle took its time to boil, and I let it. I learned which floorboards creaked or which ones stayed silent. I learned the way the house preferred the windows opened, not all at once, never that, but one or two at a time, spaced apart. I didn't know how I knew that, I just did. In the afternoons, I read in the small room at the back of the house, the one with the narrow window and the built-in shelves that still smelled faintly of dust and paper, even though they were empty. It felt like a room that had once been loved deeply and then left alone of respect. At night, I slept better than I had in years. The dreams continued. Sometimes it was water again, sometimes wind moving around through the tall grass. Once I dreamed of footsteps walking slowly through the hallway, stopping just outside my bedroom door. Not anonymously, but politely, as though whoever it was didn't want to wake me. When I woke up from that dream, my heart was racing. I felt washed over. It wasn't until the second week that the house learned my name. I noticed it in the way you noticed a shift in the weather. Subtle, but aloud more often, narrating small things to myself in the quiet. Where I set my keys, what I planned to make for dinner. The house listened without comment. One evening, while washing dishes, I said my name aloud. Not loudly, just enough for it to exist in the room. The water in the sink paused. Not stopping, not exactly. The sound faltered, like a skipped breath, then continued as normal. I stood very still, hands submerged in the warm water, listening. The house did not make another sound. That night, I dreamed of someone calling my name. Not urgently, not loudly, but carefully, as though they were testing the shape of it, learning how it felt to say. When I woke up, my name lingered in the air like a scent. After that, the house began to respond in small ways. When I felt anxious, the room seemed to grow warmer, cozier. When I lingered too long in one space, a soft draft would encourage me to move, guiding me gently elsewhere. Doors never slammed, lights never flickered. Nothing dramatic ever happened. That was the strangest part. The house was not trying to frighten me. It was trying to know me. I found a loose floorboard one afternoon in the hallway. Beneath it was a shallow space, and inside the space was a single object, a smooth stone, worn to touch, as though it had been held recently. I didn't remember putting it there, but when I wrapped my fingers around it, a wave of calm moved to pass through me, slow and steady. The same feeling I got when I rested my palms against the wall and the staircase, the spot that always felt warmer than the rest. I returned the stone to its place. The floorboard settled without a sound. Weeks passed. I stopped locking. I stopped locking the bedroom door at night, not because I felt unsafe, but because it felt necessary, like closing the door between friends. I started leaving notes around the house, small ones, thank yous, observations, little fragments of my thoughts written in careful handwriting and tucked onto the shelves or window seals. The notes never moved, but never gathered dust either. One evening, I came home later than usual. The sky was already dark, the road barely visible between the trees. As I turned the key to the lock, a feeling settled over me, relief, so deep it nearly brought me to tears. Inside the house was warmer than it should have been. A lamp was on the living room, though I was certain I had turned it off before. I said my name again, softly this time. The lamp brightened slightly, just enough to notice. I laughed then, not out of fear, but recognition. I know, I said, I know. The house never asked me to leave, but it did begin to show me things, memories, mostly, not in visions or voices, but in impressions. The weight of someone leaning against the kitchen counter, the echo of the quiet laughter near the stairs, the sense of grief held carefully like a fragile object that had never been thrown away. The house had been alone for a long time, and now it wasn't. I realized one night, lying in bed, that the breathing sound I'd grown accustomed to wasn't the house adjusted to the cold. It was matching me. Inhale, pause, exhale, perfectly timed. I still live here. I don't tell people about the house, not because they wouldn't believe me, but because it feels private, intimate, like sharing a secret that doesn't belong solely to me. The house knows when I'm sad, it knows when I need silence, and when I need sound. Sometimes, in the early hours of the morning, it creaks softly, just enough to remind me that I'm not alone. I speak my name aloud less often. The house doesn't need to practice anymore. It knows me. And when I whisper goodnight, the walls seem to lean in just slightly, holding the quiet steady until it sleeps. Until sleep.